Hi folks, just getting ready. We're not going to start until a few minutes after 4, so if anyone's out there listening, thanks for joining me early. I'll be with you in a moment. Oh, we're at 4 o'clock, folks. We're going to start soon. I can see a few folks, one or two people anyway, have joined me online. I have to say, I'm really pleased to get people joining me live while I'm doing this lecture. But if you don't want to join me live, there might be people who want to watch the recording on Echo, which is totally fine as well. Start recording, Charles. It's an important part of giving lectures to make a recording. Don't forget that. I'll give it a few more minutes before we start the content. I haven't heard this song in a long time. This is my streaming music. It's I didn't create this music. It's by an artist called Dano Songs, who makes royalty-free music online. I purchased this song a few years ago, so I purchased a license to use it in my streams. It's called The Feeling of Sunlight. And I think it's a great song to get ready for a lecture. It's just got a good, nice, relaxing jam, ready for us to do some learning. I can see a few people are joining me online. Thank you so much for coming. Sorry I don't have a video background. I don't have a video background prepared for this class. Maybe I do somewhere, but I couldn't find it. So what we've got is just a flat image. But I'll be coming to talk to you in a minute with a live video. Thanks, Austin. Great to see someone joining me in the YouTube chat. I don't know how to get docs. I want the docs in OBS to stay there when I change window. They disappear. Sure, there's some way to get that to happen. Docs. Well. I won't mess with it right now. Go into the chat. Just keep the chat open on Restream.io, which is the platform I use just to do multi-streaming. I'm sure there are hipper options now, but when I first started multi-streaming and streaming lectures in 2020, it was all new. So this stuff was advanced for the time. 4:04, I'm going to get started at 4:05 just so that we're ready in line with our regular lecture times. I have my own whiteboard stuff in my slides already. It's a good suggestion, Austin. I used to have, I probably still have it around here, I had a little tablet for doing online lectures where I could draw into my slides directly. It did look a bit like MS Paint, so it's along those lines. Okay, 4:05. So starting it up. Hello, everybody. My window is not being shown. That's curious. I wonder why my window is not being shown. Let's go into Mac OS screen and make sure I've got that stuff. Hide OBS. Well, it doesn't want to hide OBS. It's also hiding Chrome. So I'm going to not hide OBS. That's a bit strange that happens, but here we go. Hi folks, thank you so much for coming. This is an online lecture. I'm doing it online live on Twitch and YouTube for Sound and Music Computing here in the year of 2025. This is our week 9 lecture, semester 1, 2025. And it's raining outside, it's just gotten dark, and we're in for a couple of hours of late night or late afternoon computer music making. So thank you very much for joining me live, those who are live. Thank you so much for joining me offline later, those who are watching this on YouTube or Echo 360 after the fact. And in fact, for their benefit, I'm going to record it locally. Here we go, start recording. So yes, again, Comp 4350/8350, Sound and Music Computing, our week 9 lecture on making hardware interfaces for making music. I had a bit of a lecture fail yesterday in the live slot, so I'm going to give an online lecture. And as an added bonus, I improved the lecture quite a lot from where it was yesterday. So it's going to be a better lecture today. Getting Twitch verification codes I already got. I hadn't opened my Twitch account for a little while. I use Twitch and YouTube for streaming when I stream lectures. You can go through on my YouTube channel. It's got all of my previous streamed lectures from previous classes if you want to see them. If that's what makes you happy to watch long lectures from long ago versions of subjects. Today's lecture, we're going to have a digression, a significant digression into the Lens Performance Assessment. It will take us a fair little bit of time to explain. I just wanted to have it set out in a lecture here in week 9, because from next week, we're really starting to lock in some of the details of your performances for the end of the semester. And I want the details to be here in Echo 360, here on YouTube, here on Twitch, and into your brains so that everyone is on the same page with that. We're also going to talk about some high-level concepts and discussions on physical computer musical instruments, making things in hardware with little circuit boards like this little guy here. I probably have some more circuit boards I'll bring out, but I've got an example with this one, so that's the one we're going to be using. We'll talk a little bit about different approaches for designing hardware interfaces in music. There's a little bit of the thoughts of one of our international colleagues, Maria Ballman, from the Netherlands, and her book Composing Interactions, where she set this stuff out beautifully. We'll talk a bit about the mapping question and then make a little demo using this as a controller for music in PD in a little bit more of a significant way than we did with the MIDI hardware controllers, where everything was kind of pre-mapped and ready to go. This, we have to solve some problems to make things work. So we will give that a try towards the end of the lecture. I think it's going to be really fun. We're going to have some good times with microbits, and hopefully something will break, because when things break, we learn about it. So breaking stuff is good. I can see a few folks in the chat. Thank you so much for emoting, I think, is what's happening. A few folks emoting there. The emoji don't translate well into Restream, so happy that it's happening. But I'm maybe not seeing the full effect of the emoji. Here's our digression, and like just a cool picture of some cool people, tutors in this class, doing a cool performance, which is Ichen and Sandy doing things with cool hardware interfaces and on stage. And this is picture is there because we're reflecting on how we're going to do our concerts towards or in the exam period. So let us talk about these practical matters for the final lens performance. Final lens performance, it's your last assessment item in this course. It's a 40% assessment, and it's a bit of a hybrid assessment because it's partly an in-person ensemble exam scheduled at a certain time. One time your ensemble gets together, you do your performance. It's partly getting together your performance materials and submitting them through GitLab as an assignment. So it's this hybrid between in-person components where we make sure everyone has a great experience in the room, and we make sure that it's you doing your assessment, and an assignment where you're submitting something through GitLab using the skills that you know well from your previous classes and from the previous assessments in this class. Something to keep in mind, although this assessment takes place in a group context, you're performing in a group, it is actually an individual assessment. And I get this question a lot. What if my group does the wrong thing? And we might be marked reflecting on what other people do. No, you're marked on your own work. You're creating a piece of computer music for people in your group to play. Everyone in your group does an individual piece, 1, 2, 3, or 4, depending if you have 3 or 4 people, and you are getting together to play each of your pieces in sequence as a group, but you're marked only on your piece that you've created that other people are playing with you. So it's an individual assessment in a group context. So you're being marked only on your work. It's really important to keep in mind. I know that maybe some people are like, why does Charles keep hammering this ensemble assessment thing? Last time I taught this class, we got to the exam period, there were people who did not realize that they had to create their own individual pieces. And that certainly limited the amount of work that they were able to do in terms of creating that work when it was happening very late in the game. So a bit of a surprise for them. I don't want people to be surprised. What are you doing? What are you making here in this work? You will create a computer music system that can be performed live by a group of students at a live concert. This could take the form of a new computer musical instrument or a composition that a group of performers control. A musical instrument or a composition. It seems like there are 2 different things here, but actually they're 2 different ways of thinking about the same thing, and we'll talk a bit more about that throughout this lecture. What does this mean? This means that it's a computer music system created by you, creating or performing original music with your group, original music. So just for clarity, I said this before for the solo assessment, but do not play covers or music created by other people for this assessment. That's not acceptable in this assessment or the course as a whole. Even if you reference it, I just don't want to see that. Playing covers of music by other people is not a good way to demonstrate your completion of the learning outcomes of this course, because you're not demonstrating that you can create a piece of computer music if you're just kind of orchestrating or synthesizing or realizing someone else's piece. So the no covers rule is really protection for you to do work which is allowing you to demonstrate the learning outcomes of the course and allows me to give you marks for it. So that's just making it clear what that is relation to. No covers, no music created by other people. Parts here. We've got two parts to talk about. First part's the performance, second part's the GitLab repo. Part one, your ensemble performance. So this is what you'll perform live in person. It must involve all members of your Lens ensemble. That means at least 3 people. I think that there are some groups out there where a person has dropped out of the course and there are just 2 people left. We will have to fix that so that there are 3 people in those groups, because a 2-person group is not going to be acceptable for this assessment. It must be created with 1 or more of the computer music languages studied this semester. So that means that the sound must be created by PD or Strudel. Those are your options. Someone asked if they could use both, and the answer is yes. So I've changed the assessment or updated the wording so it's clear that you can use both if you want to in your piece. The piece that you perform must be 4 to 5 minutes in length. That is, for the absolute clarity, 240 to 300 seconds in length, no shorter and no longer. It must be presented at a Lens performance and recorded through our HDMI mixer system. It must have the video uploaded into your GitLab repo by the due date. So there's going to be 2 steps here. One is that you do a performance in person. People can come and watch if you want to invite them. A tutor or me will be there to manage the recording. We'll give you a file that you will then take away, cut out your chunk of the performance, and put it into your GitLab repository by the due date. You will need to have something which is recorded from that system to submit. You can't record this another way and submit it outside of our concert performance system. And if you try to, I'll know, because you won't be able to replicate the way we record it. So I will be seeing, you might have seen some of the videos from last year's performances where there are 4 screens, 4-up display on the screen, as well as a video camera showing the other performances, and that is how it's going to look in the video that you get to record. So this must be uploaded into your GitLab repo by the due date. You'll have to snip out your chunk of the performance. Now I've said 240 to 300 seconds, not 200 milliseconds. That'd be a very short performance. Look, I'm willing to be a little bit flexible about this, because when you're doing a live performance, things can go wrong. But if you go for more than 6 minutes, I will ask the tutor to stop you. You won't be able to play anymore. So there'll be some sort of in the room expectation that you do continue your piece for at least 4 minutes, and preferably stopping at 5. But at some point, you will be stopped from playing longer. And if you upload something that's out like a few seconds outside of that boundary, yes, you'll probably have a little X against it in GitLab. You might choose to edit it down a little bit so it fits within 300, but it's just, you know, within reasonable grounds there. You won't be allowed to go too far over this. And if you record something that's very short, that would be problematic, not in terms of not meeting well, it would be not meeting the specification, but it would be problematic in terms of demonstrating you've met the learning outcomes. So that's a reason not to do that. Just seeing emoji in the chat. No one's having concerned shrieks of outrage about this so far, which is good. Good that it's all clear to everybody. The second part is your performance materials. So part 1, your concert. Part 2, performance materials. You must submit your performance materials through GitLab in your fork of the Lens performance repository. So far, I haven't got that repository uploaded yet, but it will be something very similar to the solo performance repository. Ooh, someone says I can buy viewers on Twitch. Thanks, Twitch bot. Not going to do that. Your performance materials must include, just for to clarify, must include all patches, code, sound files, scores, and instructions required to produce your performance, and that's something you should be uploading to Git. And you must also include the readme.md file, I think it will be called that, explaining how to get your performance up and running, and it should include screenshots and code listings of important parts of your performance that you need to talk about to explain how to do it. So, and finally, it must include the video that that's recorded for you and sent back to you through the Diary video repo. So you snip out your part of the performance from that big video of the concert and upload that into your GitLab repo. Just clarifying things are working on the stream, and they are, which is good. So the reason I do all this is that everything is marked from that GitLab repo. I can't get around to every single person's performance. That would take me, I think I worked out around 35 hours to watch every performance live, including all of the changeover times. I can mark everyone's performance offline, like an assignment, so I'm getting you to do a little bit of work to get all of these materials together in one place so that I can mark it fairly across the cohort. And the whole thing, the whole shebang is due on 6th June 2025 at 23:59. If you've been watching carefully, you might know that that's a little bit of an extension on what is on the class summary. I have changed that date because I needed to add extra days to assess everybody in the class. I did not expect to have 180 students in this class this semester. The last time we ran it, we had, I think, 60 people completing it, so we've grown by 3x. I thought, oh gosh, if it's really busy, it might grow to be like 110, 120. But getting to 180 was very unexpected, and that meant that we had to adjust things to add more days. I can only put concerts on the working days. There's a long weekend in between. So there'll be times for your concerts which are all working days, and enough times that we cover the whole class with a significant buffer of extra times in case there are problems, which I don't expect there to be, but across 180 people, things happen. Now, concerts, times, and dates and locations. So dates and times will be 6 days between the 28th of May and the 6th of June. And I've got 2 rooms booked. There'll be the big band room in the Peter Carmel building, which is the sort of addendum on the School of Music, and Lecture Theatre 1, Level 5 on the ANU School of Music building, in the main building. The reason I've got these 2 rooms is that big band room is not available during most of the exam period because they run music students recitals in there. I guess the music students should have priority of using spaces within their own building. And Lecture Theatre 1 is not used for performances. These are good rooms to use because it's kind of okay for us to make some noise in rooms at the School of Music, whereas if I use other rooms on campus, there might be a very quiet exam happening next door, and I don't want to upset people by playing loud music right next to their written exam. The first 3 days, May 28, 29, 30, I think, will be in the big band room. So for folks who choose to go early, I would say that you have to go early, so that's a downside, but upside is it's probably a more fun space to use. Lecture Theatre 1 is more of like a classroom at the School of Music. Still, it will be a concert, we'll have a PA system, it'll sound good, it'll look great on the recording, but it won't be the same quite as having the big band room. On the other hand, folks doing their performances in the Lecture Theatre will have a few extra days to work on it. So I can't make everyone be on the same day at the same time because it's just impossible. People have to be at different times, different days. Not quite, I don't know if that's a fairness problem, but this is just how it works when we have to have in-person performance assessments across many students. Very important that this is an exam, and that means that you can't complete your performance assessment, your ensemble performance, outside of our provided times and dates. You can't tell me, oh, I just want to do it on this other day in this other space. That's not acceptable. You must use our booking system. This counts as a local area organized exam with specific times given to specific groups of students. You'll have a booking system. You can make sure it doesn't clash with your other exams or other things that are important. But for something to happen outside of this period, it would need to be an ECA performance, an ECA application. Someone's got a question. How exciting. If the group performance is 4 to 5 minutes, is there a minimum or maximum length for cutting and uploading our own part? Yeah, here we go. First time that we're going to be looking on at a misconception already. This is 4 to 5 minutes is your ensemble performance, not everyone's ensemble performance. So I've got 4 to 5 minutes in length just for your performance. That means that there's going to be maybe, if there's 4 people in your group, there'll be a 5-minute performance, 5-minute performance, 5-minute performance, 5-minute performance. And then maybe we'll have like 3 minutes setup time, 3 minutes setup time, 3 minutes setup time, 3 at the start, 3 at the start. So across the whole performances, we will have the whole concert length will be, what's that, 5 times 3, 15 plus 20 minutes, that's 35 minutes. So the concert will be 35 minutes in length, and your performance will be 5 minutes in length. So yes, the time limit for your own part is minimum 4, maximum 5 minutes. The whole concert length will be, 35 to 45 minutes. You'll get a 45-minute slot for the whole concert for your whole group. Obviously, if we're looking at a group of 3, it'll be a shorter concert. So group of 3 will have 15 plus 12 minutes. Oop, back to black. 15 plus 14, 17 minutes. So their concert will be quite, am I right here with my numbers? I don't think I am. 15 minutes plus, no, it should be 27, shouldn't it? 27. I wish I had my tablet. It's got to be around here somewhere. I don't know where it is. It's in a box. I could have gotten my Wacom tablet out to make this look all the more slick. So I hope that answers the question. Your individual part of the performance is 5 minutes in maximum length and 4 minutes in minimum length. In practice, I haven't had people have problems with that. I'm looking through the performances in the past. I think there were a few that actually had a longer maximum was 7 minutes. A few that are more like 8.5 minutes. But if we're looking at 5 minutes, and if there's a tutor waving at you, stop, then probably everyone will get the picture, and it's going to be about 4 to 5 minutes. We might have a big light that turns on after 4 minutes, so you're allowed to stop. But it's something that you folks will be responsible for. Okay, great. Thank you so much for having a question in the chat. I'm happy to keep answering questions as they come up. What are these things going to be like? I guess I answered the question here on this slide. What are these concerts going to be like? Well, they might look at something a little bit like this. Here's a concert at a room in the School of Music. This is in the Larry Sitsky recital space. 4 people at desks. 4 people at desks. There's another question in the chat. I'll answer this in a minute. 4 people at desks with their laptops out. They've got some hardware devices that they were using in this instance. Everybody will be collaborating in these pieces. So for instance, if we have got 4 performances here, 4 performers, right, we'll see 4 pieces in this concert. So there'll be 1 time slot, 45 minutes. There'll be 1 piece by Josh here. He'll do a piece where he will have prepared some code for everybody else to use. So he'll have a piece where everybody else is playing a part. So Josh is not playing a solo piece, he's prepared an ensemble piece for 4 people to play. And then we finish off with Josh's work, and Rowan has his go. So Rowan has prepared an ensemble piece with parts for 3 other people to play as well as him. So every piece is an ensemble work composed and created by an individual member of this group. So you need to collaborate with each other member. You need to collaborate with those members to perform your music, but not exactly to create it. Of course, you're allowed to be inspired by other members, but it's not like doing a group diary where you're making 1 submission. You're making a submission for yourself with music that everyone is performing. everyone is participating. So yeah, if Rowan has made a piece, he has to create role or things to do for the other three people in the group, and they will have to, those parts that are created should work together in some way. And if you look in the YouTube channel for the Laptop Ensemble, there is more than 100 examples of pieces. Each of those pieces was created by a single person with parts distributed to 3 to 5 or 3 or 4 other members of their group, maybe 2 to 4 other members. I think there's biggest groups of 5. Again, happy to keep answering questions. The more we ask questions and answer them here, then the more I can just point to this video when people are confused later. So each group gets 1 time slot to perform each piece, all 3 to 4 pieces in one 45-minute concert, and you have to be prepared to play each piece in sequence. The sequence will be the same as the order on the YAML file with your ensembles. So it'll be a sequence of UIDs, and the way we'll ask to do this is that we will get you to sit in order at the tables. Someone is asking in the chat, would it be correct to assume that there won't be any Lens performances on June 2nd as it's a public holiday? Absolutely correct. There are no Lens performances on June 2nd as it's a public holiday. I cannot use the School of Music on that day as it is closed, and I don't have access to it. So we can use these spaces on working days during ANU hours. I'll provide plenty of times, mainly in the afternoon and the early evening. So I think that's times that people would probably prefer rather than getting in at 9 o'clock in the morning. There'll be times at 9 o'clock if we have to use those, but I think folks will probably prefer to use the afternoon and evening times. So you must be prepared to play each piece in sequence with little changeover time. So you can't come into the performance and, you know, Wei Tong, who's number 4, is not going to be able to say, oh, Charles, my piece is really complicated. Can I go first? Sorry, Wei Tong, your UID is last on the list for whatever reason, so you'll have to be last. That's just the way it's going to be. The technical setup will be really controlled here. This is actually not a good photo to demonstrate that. The next slide has a good photo of the setup. This was a bit of a mess. This wasn't actually the final performance. This was a pre-test concert with these guys, not a final performance concert. We will have drop-in labs where we don't have lab content, don't have diaries in week 11 and 12. In those drop-in labs, we will have our HDMI system ready for you to test out, so you can make sure that your computer will work. Question, even though the 4 pieces are separate, will we be marked on how well the 4 pieces flow together as they are played in sequence? No, you will not, because I will not know when I'm marking them. I will not know what the sequence is of those pieces, the 4 pieces being played together in one concert. I will open a GitLab repo and I will see your piece with your UID attached to it as a video file, and I will mark it. And then I will go to another GitLab repo, which will have someone else's UID with their piece, and I will mark that one. And I will go to another one. And I don't know what order I will mark them in. I usually try to mark things in a pretty random order because it's not a good idea to be going through UIDs. That it does tend to have some negative effects on fairness of marking if you're going through in a specific predictable order. So yeah, the flow between pieces is not a marking consideration. Every work is independent. Sometimes people have come up with, here's a common one. Someone I'm sure will come and tell me that they want to do, I've got 4 people in my group, I want to do the 4 seasons as our pieces. Well, that's a great idea. It won't make any difference to me grading them, that they're related in any way. I won't see them being related. Okay, allocation. So this is where you have to pick your time. You'll need to discuss with your group what your time constraints are. So you might have other exams. You might have work appointments that you can't get out of or don't want to get out of. You might have an important something else that's happening that you can't deal with. You will have a lot of flexibility. There will be a lot of times to choose. You'll have to discuss with your group what times you can do and book one. So our expected way of this working is that in the week 10 workshop, you'll book a time where your group is available. There are plenty of extra times. We have about 50 groups and we have about 80 time slots. So the amount of times is much bigger than the number of groups, so there'll be a time for everybody. There's not going to be fights about times. you must be flexible and organized here. So you need to know what is going on for you during the exam periods. The exam timetable's now out, so you need to put them in your diary so you know when those exams are. If you have anything else going on, you need to be able to deal with that, but you also need to be flexible. So if you've got an exam in the morning or in the afternoon, we can't guarantee that you won't also have a concert on that day. So having 2 exams in one day, not something I can deal with. You'll have to discuss that with your group. If there's a specific reason why you feel that you need to have other people be flexible with you, well, you'll have to discuss it with them so that you can come together to make these decisions about when your pieces should be performed within the exam period. Again, we have heaps of times, so the times are not a constraint here. Here's a good picture of the technical setup. Oh, this looks really cool. This was in Llewellyn Hall. We're not using Llewellyn Hall this year. There's good things and bad things about that. It was kind of cool playing in Llewellyn Hall, but also it doesn't sound great on the stage. It sounds better in the audience than on the stage. And the distance between where people were sitting and where I would be marking them was far, so it was a bit hard to communicate with people about what's going on. You can see what's going on here is I've got this thing. That's our HDMI mixer. Actually, I've got one right here. Where is it? HDMI mixer. Where are you? Here it is. Here it is. I'm not using it right now. I could be using it to give the lecture, but that's an HDMI mixer. It's got lots of HDMI inputs, and I can switch between them, and there's all these little buttons that do different things. So it's a cool piece of kit, and it works really well because it lets me do these neat 4-up performances, also with a little camera. Here's the camera, little camera image, so it might be a bit small for you to see. A live camera image, there's the camera, looking at everybody in the group. So we'll have the live camera set up so that I can see everybody is present in the performance, and the HDMI mixer will be recording everyone's work, and you can see there's a little red light, little circular light down there. That means it's recording, so I knew that it was recording at that moment. And again, the tutor or whoever is there to manage it, could be me, will be managing the mixer and making sure the recording is working. So we will provide for every laptop a power outlet for your laptop. That's important. An HDMI input for your video and your sound. It's usually easier to get the sound through HDMI, cleaner and better in almost every way. We will do a little bit of a test. We might have some failover mechanism in case we just need to use analog output, but really the HDMI sound is much better, much cleaner when things are working. And a Wi-Fi router, hopefully with internet. There's the Wi-Fi router there. In Llewellyn Hall, we happen to have internet. In Big Band Room, I think we will have internet. We've had it before, but it's a bit harder to predict for Lecture Theatre 1. So I'm not exactly sure until we get into the space and everything is set up how the internet stuff is configured. So very important, you need to provide whatever adapters or cables you need to connect HDMI to your computer. So you should also bring your power adapter. Now we will have some spare HDMI adapters around, but it's not something I want to be making a mistake with that. So please make sure you have an HDMI adapter that you know and trust and works fine. That would help. Here we go. There's 3 policies. First one, the external equipment policy. I will just read it verbatim. You are allowed to use equipment external to your laptop for the purpose of controlling your computer music software in the final performance. This includes MIDI controllers, human interface devices, Arduinos, microbits, etc. We have caveats though. You can't use anything that has to plug into the wall using AC power, so I only want to see USB powered things or battery powered stuff. You can't use anything that requires more than one person to carry. Working from experience here, it slows everything down when people want to bring pianos into the venue. You may not use any equipment that creates sound which is used in your performance. So the idea of these is to use PD or strudel to create sounds. If there are external synthesizers or decks or samplers making sounds, it's confusing. I don't know what sound's coming from what. I can't see it on the recording, and it makes it much more difficult to mark. And I'll probably be tempted to mark it down because of the use of those other things. So make sure you're demonstrating your sound making in PD or strudel. Keep in mind that you're creating an ensemble performance and that any equipment you're using should contribute to how your ensemble works together to create your piece of music. So I've seen things in before where people had, a cool, cool DJ deck or a cool sampler or something that they could use, but other people in their group couldn't use it. So how is it helping the collaborative performance? Just something to keep in mind, that any hardware should really enhance the ensemble collaboration and not be like person with a cool setup and then 3 people just pressing play in PD. The external software policy. You're allowed to use external libraries or extensions for the computer music systems used in the course, but these have to be documented and they need to be listed as a reference. You are also allowed to use middleware that goes in between computer music software and an external or internal hardware interface. For example, Osculator, Wekinator, or MobMuPlat. They're examples of something that goes in between maybe some special hardware or an interface and PD, or Strudel, I guess. But Osculator, Wekinator, and MobMuPlat would all work better with PD, I think. You're not allowed to use music production software such as Ableton Live, Pro Tools, or Logic. Just don't want to see that. I've got a no music production software rule. Any external libraries that you should use need to be used in a sophisticated, original, and independent way in order to show your attainment of the learning outcomes. I've put this stuff in here just to be really clear about how things need to be used. I had some issues previously with folks using a lot of external libraries, but in a very simplistic way, and then being like, well, it sounds cool. I should get good marks, right? And I'm like, yeah, but you're doing kind of week 2 programming with someone else's cool synthesizer. So I need to make sure that you're operating at the right level, at a high level across the learning outcomes. Last policy, the integrity policy. This is the same as, any assessment has an academic integrity policy, but if you use external non-reference software in your performance, that would breach academic integrity. Just being clear, academic integrity is not just about having people do your assignments for you and colluding. It's also about not citing work, including things that you've found online without explaining how it works. So you must reference any software not created by you, any hardware systems required for your performance, and any software developed in collaboration with another student. I really want to see these references. It's part of acknowledging your collaborative work over the semester, which has been happening so well in this class. So we expect collaboration in this course. The trade-off is that we also expect precise and complete referencing. So don't skip this part. Don't claim others' work as your own, even by accident. Basically what I'm saying here is don't make mistakes with the references. Please be perfect. That's my expectation. There's another great instance, another great question in the chat. I'll get to that question in a minute. I'll just do this slide. Interactive ensemble music making. What is so hard about this assessment? Is it writing synths that sound cool? No, it's not. You know how to do that very well. In fact, everyone in the class has kind of been up on the learning curve quite far on writing synths that sound cool already because you've done your solo performance. The big challenge are the logistical challenges of organizing an ensemble performance and figuring out who does what in your performance, making parts for everybody, figuring out how to structure a performance, that is organized sound or the compositional aspects. So as a rule of thumb, and I'll hammer this over the next few weeks in the next lectures, you want to give each performer less to do than you think and that you think you need to. Expect your performers to think and communicate. So you're not composing for robots, you're composing for human beings. And I suppose you can assume that they're as good as you are at making computer music. So they're taking the class too. So they know what to do. And they are able to improvise because they've been improvising with you every week. They're able to communicate and think. I want you to give your performers creative control. So let them have access to parts of your performance that might be a bit risky. You've got to give them the opportunity to muck up your performance in some way in order to give them the opportunity to make it really awesome. So if you want to have an awesome performance, you need to make sure there are risks available. I think someone talked or mentioned in a class today, there was a performance where some of my students in a previous year, some time ago now, had a staged fight on stage. I mean, actually like fists, right? And they had all of these punching noises and stuff inside their synths, and it was part of their performance that the students had written in. And yeah, it was risky. I mean, they probably weren't going to hurt each other, but it was risky in terms of making sure people were doing the right thing, making sure people would be able to pull off the staged fight. I wouldn't recommend doing a stage fight in your performances. That I think the students who were in charge had quite a good background in theatre and acting, so they were able to do something quite convincing. But they certainly took a risk, and it paid off because it was a really convincing and surprising performance, something really unique in the history of the class. Here, I'll answer the question now. Have there been cases where a piece couldn't be played due to internet connectivity issues? No, there have not. Would our marks be deducted if that happened? No, they would not. Would we be given another chance to perform? I mean, if something went so badly in your performance that you couldn't do it, we would fix it. So at the very least, right, you would be eligible for an extenuating circumstances application. But I don't think you would need to go to that length. I think we could probably rearrange it to be like in a 45-minute time slot later the same day or the next day, right? If something goes terribly, terribly wrong. I haven't had any instances where anything has gone terribly, terribly wrong. I've seen some ones that were close, but they were not students who were the like at the top end of the range who were really thinking about this stuff. They were perhaps students who had not thought very hard about their performance and where everything was last minute and they hadn't properly communicated to everybody in their group and it kind of just was a bit of a flop. So in that case, they probably didn't deserve to get a very good mark because they weren't very well prepared. But if you're prepared and everything is, you know how your thing is supposed to work, like any kind of external issue is going to be very obviously out of your control and will be easily able to control for that. But basically, like the internet connections within the School of Music, the regular Wi-Fi is fine for connecting to the internet. And we will have a Wi-Fi router there in case you want to do some network connections between the computers in your group. So that will be available to you as well. Obviously, I prefer to have our own router and a wired internet connection, but we just can only do our best with that one. So yeah, I tend to feel like students often are a little bit worried about very low chance scenarios, and having had more than 100 performances in this class, I've only seen a few where anything's gone dramatically wrong, and usually it was the student's fault, not anything to do with our gear. Yeah, and even if something does go kind of is a bit dodgy in the performance, I tend to mark around that. We sort of assume that all live performances are risky, so I have I have enough of a brain to be able to mark around live performance issues that are not your fault, and maybe sort of think about things that are due to lack of sophistication or lack of preparation in terms of giving out lower marks. Julian's favorite Lens performance was one that never happened: live hacking to make music. Live hacking to make music. Well, there's still time, isn't there, Julian? Making hardware interfaces. This is the real content of the lecture, basically. It's not a long lecture, but we're talking a bit about hardware today. So what have we done so far? We've talked kind of more about in-the-box sort of interfaces. What can you do with buttons and sliders and selectors in the GUI and PD? And you can do similar things in Strudel. What could you do with the human interface devices on your laptop, right? Your keyboard, mouse, etc. And if you wanted to do something more complicated, I've pointed you in the direction of processing a system for designing interactive artworks that has good support for OSC and Serial and MIDI. So processing is a great library to explore if you wanted to create a custom interface. But these things are all kind of inside your computer. So what if you wanted to get outside of your computer? What other interaction options exist beyond that? And what you can do is start thinking about hardware hacking or creating new hardware interfaces that would connect to a computer. And look, this is something I want to mention here. I want to provide the opportunity to explore this but I can't teach you every detail on it. It would be great to have a whole second course where this is like sound and music computing 1, and then there would be hardware interfaces for making music as an extension course. But we can only do it for 1 week, including, well, 2 weeks, including the first interface lecture. So a few options here. The few options are, you can use maybe other computing devices. So for instance, your phone or MobMuPlat, a phone or tablet can use MobMuPlat or TouchOSC. I've heard folks talking about TouchOSC, so I'm aware that people are trying that out. I haven't seen anybody using MobMuPlat yet, but it's available to you. Another thing you can do is to use hardware that you can program, like little microcontrollers or small computers like Raspberry Pis, with some sensors that might be able to talk by OSC or serial or USB or Bluetooth or any other network protocol back to your computer where you're running Strudel and PD to make sound. So a few examples of these kind of devices are the microbit, which I've got one right here. We're going to play with it in a minute. Arduinos are really common. Bella is something which is uncommon. It's more of a Linux computer designed for doing the whole, building a hardware design and creating a piece with it. The Bella has a Linux computer on the bottom and a kind of pre-programmed interface board on the top, and the Linux computer can run PD, so you can write PD patches to compose your music. A good example of doing this, there's a few examples within the YouTube channel. One is Sandy's. Sandy, being a tutor in the course, has her performance called Dialogues in Space, which used some microbits as part of the performance. You have to watch the performance to see it. It sort of happens halfway through. What's the benefit here? Well, it lets you experiment not only with interface devices external to your computer, but new kinds of computing interfaces. So just as an example, here's not a student in the course, but things I saw at a conference, people playing with soft computer interfaces made of conductive thread and sewn into different fabrics. So they were using these strips of knitted fabric which had some conductive thread, and if you stretched it, it actually changed the electrical properties, and you could sense that using the Bella, and it would change the properties of a synth. So something which you can't buy at a shop, but you can experiment with it, and it can lead to some really compelling performances. So I think I might have shown this slide before, but a simple workflow for doing these kinds of NIMEs, or new interfaces for musical expression, would be that you have some kind of sensor, lots of different options here, light sensors, touch sensor, that's a movement sensor, like that's going to be a moisture sensor for sticking into the soil or the ground, a sound sensor, probably accelerometers and temperature sensors and other little small component things. Then you'll need to have some sort of microcontroller or programmable board that you can use to interpret that sensor data and then send it directly to your computer over USB. And on your computer, you'll have PD or Strudel or whatever, and then you have the sound coming out of the computer. So that's the typical kind of workflow for this. The reason that I'm talking about microbits today, and the reason I like these little boards, is that they have a lot of sensors built into them, so you don't have to plug things in. They've got a movement sensor, or also called an accelerometer, a temperature sensor, I think. They've got a microphone, and you can kind of make a light sensor with them. So there's lots of different options on this board. We will use this just as a device to send serial over USB, but they also have Bluetooth, so there's potential to send signals in different ways. So how do we design such things? We've got these parts. I presume everyone here is game to hack these things, or if they want to have a go, that they might have had some experience. There's certainly folks who've experienced making things with microbits and Arduinos in high school. Everyone who's an undergraduate student in our computing programs will have made software for the microbit, because you've come through Comp 2300 where we use the microbits. You might have used other systems within engineering courses, like Discovering Engineering. But how do we design something into a musical interface that's going to be good? How do we make it good? two approaches we're going to talk about. One is called the instrumental approach. So in the instrumental approach, you make something that's like a regular musical instrument, and you're just making a different one using some computer hardware. So we take inspiration from traditional acoustic musical instruments and well-established music traditions, and design, we have a task-related design, so the design of how we control and make sound as our design motivation, without thinking too much about what that sound will do, is what the end result of that sound will be. Might seem a bit weird so far, but we'll contrast this with another approach. So some folks, friends of the channel, Eduardo Miranda and Marcelo Wanderley, wrote in 2006 that there are different kinds of digital musical instruments, or DMIs, as they were fond of saying. One kind was like an augmented musical instrument. So you take a existing musical instrument and augment it by extending it with sensors and other controllers. Another system would be something that's like an instrument, but it doesn't have that original instrument in there anymore. So it's instrument-like gestural controllers that model an acoustic instrument as closely as possible. Another level, further away from existing instruments, would be instrument-inspired gestural controllers. So you take maybe inspiration from the ways that an acoustic musician operates their instrument, and take those gestures or something about that process as your inspiration for generating a new kind of musical instrument with a new configuration. And then something else entirely would be alternate gestural controls, or alternatives. Things that aren't directly modeled or inspired by other instruments, and they might be like fully imaginary musical instruments, completely new concepts. Here's a few examples. So a great example, the extended clarinet, 2016. Original first author was Carl Nordmark from Sweden, but the main performer with this system is Robert Eck, also of Sweden, great clarinet player. And in fact, this work has been going on for a long time. I saw Robert Eck play it at a conference last year. So it's been happening, started in 2016 or a bit earlier, and still going on in 2024. The original idea was to take the bell of the clarinet, which is a detachable part, and replace it with a new bell that would have some microcontroller built into it with some sensors and a light. So it would be, or an RGB light could display what's going on. Really cool idea, and allowed a clarinet player who can move their instrument sort of up and down, side to side, move around the stage to control some other musical processes in a fairly natural way. So the concept here was to preserve the interaction complexity and everything you can do on the clarinet, but add an extra layer. And that's often what these extended or augmented instruments are about. Yeah. The Svamperlin, Laurel S. Pardue. Laurel, I think, still works for Ableton now, following a PhD as a researcher. So Laurel's work is sort of embedded in our professional digital music tools. It's pretty clear where this idea came from. It's a violin where some of the stuff has been taken off. We've got a new kind of way of holding the strings, a different configuration for holding them up here. And then the bridge has been replaced with this different setup of pickups, some sort of electromagnetic pickups, and I think using metal strings. So a completely different string setup compared to a regular violin. But it's got a microcontroller built into it and the ability to have some really complex sounds programmed. Custom designed electromagnetic pickup, capturing the velocity or the loudness of each string individually and the pitch of your finger position. And the idea was to try to disentangle the violin gestural system from the actual sounds that are made. So you can use the signal from those pickups not directly as a sound source, but as something to control the parameters of a physical model of a different kind of instrument or a different kind of string instrument. A really cool project, and one that was quite stunning to see in person, actually. Changing the sound of a violin just by changing some parameters in their synth. Other ideas, adapted bass guitars. These are getting a little bit further away from augmented musical instruments. It's more like replacing the musical instrument, taking the guitar idea and the gestural language and replacing everything about it. So this is, again, starts to look not a lot like a guitar. This is a little bit more like a guitar. This looks like something else, a different kind of like small harp instrument, but uses a guitar layout. And then this one, again, similar to that one, but doesn't have the string. So a bit exploring this concept of moving away from a guitar body and exploring how much guitar technique you can still use. So an interesting paper, you can read more about that work here. These ones use the Bella system. Who's this person? That's me. Phase Rings 2015 by me. I didn't put in my own slide. Yichen wrote this slide last year, so someone else put my work into it. But the idea with this instrument, obviously it plays on an iPad, these little rings, and you would touch on the rings to make a certain kind of sound. And the two things you could do basically was tap the rings or slide your finger across them, which would create a sustained sound. And the inspiration was these percussion instruments or percussion techniques used on bowls or wine glasses. So you can use singing metal bowls. It can be struck or rubbed with the beater, the edge. And wine glasses you can strike with something light without breaking them, or rub around the top with a finger to make a sustained sound. So adapting that technique to a touchscreen interface and seeing what can happen when you do that. Obviously, we're not limited to one bowl. We can have multiple in little loops, and not limited just to one sound, have lots of different sounds. So it's an instrumental inspired instrument. And then I put Yichen's later work in here. So this is where we're getting even further away from existing musical instruments. Yichen Wang had a long stream of work in exploring augmented reality musical instruments and figuring out what different kinds of musical instrument might be possible with an AR interface. So we're using one of the MetaQuest headsets here in a augmented reality mode, so she can see the real world through there, as well as her hand position, and then some virtual objects. So the cool thing about AR, you don't have to have physically possible objects. You can have cubes that float in space in a certain arrangement, and then use your hands to interact with them. So it was an imaginary musical instrument performed just with hands. And we have lots of examples about doing this, but there's a paper and videos linked if you want to see more. Other cool things I haven't shown, it's just this picture of something I saw at a conference last year. You put your hand into that and can use these different little touch pads, and they put the touch pads on Velcro so that you could configure it to where you could reach with your hand, which is a cool idea. Also had a movement sensor on the top. I think that was called the Zyborg controller. Really clever. I don't have a link for it, unfortunately. I should get the link and put it in there, but a few other examples of instrumentally designed hardware interfaces. But what's the other idea? The other big idea was the compositional approach. So rather than a focus on the instrument and what you can do with it, focus on the musical composition that you want, and then design interfaces that allow that composition to unfold with particular gestures or interactions. And Maria Ballman writes, from providing instructions for performers to create music to creating a context for performances in which the music may be experienced, not just by the performer, but by the audience or anyone interacting with them. So you're the composer, and you might ask what systems, environments, connections, etc. might be needed to enable your composition to be played. As example here, I've got this, it looks like a sculpture, doesn't it? But it's a musical interface. And in fact, there's a person inside there. There was a performance where we walked into a space, it was totally dark, and then there was a red light on this thing. And then the thing started moving. And as it moved, the music started to change over time. And in fact, the person inside there is Maria Ballman. That was one of her works. And I think it's a good example of a compositional approach. It's clearly not an instrument that you're interacting with in the same way that you use a violin or a piano or a guitar. It's an environment that a performer sort of has to be within, and their movements are translated into this composition that unfolds over time. So that was a cool idea. I've forgotten what the piece was called. I think I've got a slide on it next week. We'll see it in more detail. This is another of my works. That's from a long time ago now. 2009, come on. This is a theatre work put together at the Street Theatre called Vital LMTD. Last Man to Die was my kind of theatre troupe of interactive media theatre people. And we were doing these performances where we would link our different specializations. So Benjamin here, this is Benjamin, was a visual artist doing work with processing and other systems, quite in the early days of that, those systems on the computer. And Hannah here is an actor, exceptional actor, and I'm a musician, so I was playing, at that time, really focused on percussion performance, playing drum set and playing this mallet synthesizer here. But we had a lot of computer interfaces that we would use in our performances. And the reason this is a compositional type situation is that we kind of planned out a performance that we wanted with different scenes and built interfaces that would enable those scenes to drive the music forward. So when I was playing when we were over here at this scene with little teacups at a table, moving those cups would be seen by a camera on the bottom, which would see a marker on the bottom of the cup, and that would change the music and the visuals throughout that scene in the performance. And then if Hannah was on this raised stage speaking to the microphones, that would be interpreted by PD and used to drive the performance forward in that way. So lots of different aspects of that performance working together to let this composition unfold. Another more recent example from, not that much more recent, I guess, from our friends at Stanford University. SLORC is the Stanford Laptop Orchestra, performing this piece, Twilight. Many of the SLORC pieces look something like this, with folks at little independent stations with identical setups with their laptop and a few controllers and a little speaker. So that's a kind of a hallmark of the SLORC and Princeton Laptop Orchestra approach, is to have a fairly big ensemble. I do things differently at our ensembles in this school. My approach is to make an ensemble where we have smaller groups and you collaborate to create your pieces. Whereas with SLORC, there would be like, these performers would generally, although they learn a bit about PD or Max or whatever language they're using, often Chuck, I guess, is the language that primarily Go Wang, who's here, has devised. There would be individual pieces that are programmed and they just participate in playing those pieces during these performances. So this piece, Twilight, was inspired by a classic science fiction story, and the work is sort of, or the ensemble is following the programmatic work, following that story in their performance. So the interfaces that are there exist to enable that composition to be played out. So those are the two, I guess, concepts for how to make a hardware interface. There's the instrumental idea and the compositional idea. Now, what else do we talk about? I'm going to get to a demo in a minute, but I wanted to talk about one more thing, one more problem with hardware interfaces. This is called the mapping problem. So the issue is that when you're connecting an action to a sonic output, which is what you will have to do in hardware interfaces, there are just so many ways to do it. Like, I think you've seen already in Strudel and in PD that there are just so many parameters you can control within a computer music system. It could be sequences, your patterns, it could be the notes being made, parameters for generating notes through an algorithmic composition system. It could be the synthesis parameters. It could be effects on those synthesizers. There's so many ways to control these systems in real time that it's a bit overwhelming, and that's a problem, and that's why it's called a mapping problem. On the other hand, often when you have a interface that you've devised yourself, for instance, with a microbit, it will have a lot of sensors, and you might be thinking, how am I going to connect all those different sensors to all of these different synth parameters? And you end up thinking with this crazy spider web of connections. So it's not that it's impossible to make these connections, but it's harder, maybe harder than we might think or might expect, to make connections that make sense. And I guess reflecting on my work, I did this Vital LMTD about 16 years ago, and I think I've learned a lot about making interfaces since then. And I don't make interfaces like I did then, which were in hindsight a little bit random and arbitrary now, because I'm thinking more about how to make mappings that are going to be effective. So how do we want to control the sound, and what is the interface? And what sonic or musical processes are controlled, and what sound modalities or synth processes are we working with? So there's lots of questions with mapping problems. Here's a few more provocative questions. Are our actions with an interface triggering sounds, modifying them, or both? Good question. What parameters should be controlled? Once we've chosen that, what range of parameters should be controlled? Is the mapping going to be linear between our sensor and the parameter, or non-linear? Should the parameter be restricted just to the interesting part of the range rather than the whole range? Should there be, what about if there are computational models that have state, like an algorithmic composition or a synth mechanism or sampling? How do we track that state, and what happens if we start again? And how does our interface change as that state changes over time? That's a tricky one to unpack. And what is the sound output anyway? Is it coming from the person who's playing it? Is it coming from a PA system in the room? Where is the sound going and why? Just as a weird kind of example, I've got a performance here that I did. This was really a technical collaboration between Alexander, who's here, a friend of mine in Oslo, and there's me. And we were performing with these Myo muscle and movement sensors that would go on your arm. So the Myo sensors had 8 or maybe 6 or 8 like electricity sensors that could sense when your muscles are tensing in your skin. And it also had a pretty good accelerometer or inertial movement sensor. And we were working on different ways to create performances with those devices, and collaborating with this dancer Anne and violinist Victoria, and working on different kinds of performers. And Alexander had developed this idea of a inverse mapping. So normally the mapping would be that when you move your arm around or move your thing, you get some sound. But Alexander's idea was, what about you only get sound when you're still? So everything was upside down, right? You have to make the sound work. You have to be really still. And although it seems like we're in the middle of like a big movement in this picture, everybody's standing really still, trying to be as still as possible, but still like tense the muscles in their arms to create different sounds with this system, which was quite a strange mapping, but something that was really interesting to explore. We're up to the live demo, microbit and PD making interactive music systems. Here we go. And as a way of doing this with a bit more detail, I'm just going to make myself a bit larger. I don't know why it got smaller then. And I brought in my desk cam so we can see what's happening. Sorry, the desk cam's like a little bit small, but I can bring up the microbit. I had terrible trouble with my GoPro this morning. This GoPro, I think like, I'd like to say that it's at the end of this end of life, but I think that they're just a bit weird, particularly when you're using the HDMI output. And maybe my capture device is pretty weird too. But I've got a little microbit here. And I'm just going to turn it on. It's already got a program on it, and you can see its little blinking lights blinking away. For folks who have taken 2300 or 6300 recently, I don't want to trigger you with any trauma of dealing with the microbit. But what I'm actually doing here is just visualizing with the 3 LEDs the state of the accelerometer, the 3-axis accelerometer within the microbit. So the one axis which has some negative, or the middle LED would be about 0, and then going down from the middle would be negative acceleration, and that's the Z axis. So when I've got it here in this orientation, Z is pointing up, so it's got negative acceleration due to gravity. If I turn it over, that would be positive, but you can't see it. So what are we going to do here? Well, our goal is going to be showing you how this system works with the microbit, and then exploring how we can connect it to PD and make a sound. So that's the plan in the next 20 or so minutes. there are some links here for the microbit. I'm a bit confused about these links. I think they're from an old version of the microbit. The microbits had two significant versions, and the software has changed a little bit, but I've got software here that is now known to work. And this is what I've written in microbit Python, a special version of Python. So what's going on in this code? We can just copy the code into our microbit, microbit.org/code, microbit system, and explore how it works. So I use the Python editor mainly. I mean, if you were completely psychotic, you would want to do this in bare metal assembly, right? But I'm not going to do that today. If you want to see me doing a lot of microbit programming in bare metal assembly, and you haven't taken 2300 yet, then you can go and look at my YouTube channel. So what's going on in this code? I've made this one earlier. It's not very hard to write microbit code. The first thing I wanted to do was to make a big while loop that's going to just run all the time. So we don't get a kind of these continuously running synth environments like in PD or Strudel for free. We have to like get this to do something. Otherwise the code will just get right to the bottom and stop. Program stops. So I've got a little loop here, while true. That's a good way of making a loop, isn't it? Infinite loop, while true. And there's two things it's going to do. It's going to send accelerometer data, and then it's going to display the values. So the displaying the values part is not really necessary, but I think it's just neat to do that. If I comment that out and send it to the microbit, just connect that one up, it'll try and flash it. Just make this a bit bigger so we can see what's going on. And you can see that the little lights went out, but it's still doing the business. How do I know it's still sending serial? Its little serial blinking light is blinking like a crazy old LED right there. It's just going nuts. So that's just to demonstrate that everything is working. What is this doing? Well, we can show the serial console and see that it's spitting out a lot of numbers. We'll go through what's happening now. So let's just go through this first function, send accelerometer data. First thing we do is just get some data from the accelerometer object. That came out of this library, microbit, from microbit import star. If you want to look in the reference, you can get all this stuff, accelerometer, detect gestures and movements. That's not very hard. So this one is, you can actually do gesture detection as well, which is cool. But I really prefer just to get the raw data. And you know, funny thing about this data is that it actually comes out as an int. And the int is like 0 is neutral, and then positive numbers are positive acceleration, and negative numbers are negative acceleration. And the numbers are kind of between, yeah, about negative 2000 and about plus 2000. And they're measured sort of in thousandth of a g. So 1 is gravity. So right now we've got, you can see that I put the display back on. You can see we've got negative halfway through the range. There's not many LEDs to display it, but halfway through the range is kind of showing us negative 1 g. So I guess we could be putting this in g's, but I just want to have a number between 0 and 1. So I've done a little bit of maths here to ensure that the number is between 0 and 1 and round it to a float with 4 digits. 0 point something, something, something. So the first thing we do is get the accelerometer values, unpack that, x, y, z. Then I just make a list of my carefully constructed floats by norming, applying this maths to those values. Then I'm going to make a special string. Why do I make a string? Well, we've got to communicate with serial, and serial really just is sending bytes. And a convenient way to send data is to put it in a string and decode it. And in fact, PD uses a protocol called FUDI. This is the pure data like networking interface where you're just sending formatted strings to send your data around. So an example message is like some stuff, some text, a float, some text, and an int, and then a semicolon finishes the message. And then you can send multiple messages in a line. The semicolons is terminating each message, and the spaces are dividing up parts that will be split into a list. So it's a very simple way of encoding information and just using that within this microbit program. So then we're printing that print here is printing to, you would normally print that to a terminal if you're using a Python program on a computer, but this is going to print to serial because I actually do initialize the serial output, the UART, Universal Asynchronous Receiver Transmitter, or serial interface, initializing my UART and setting the baud rate to be 115200, good old baud rate. So these things, maybe they're not familiar to you. When I taught Comp 2300, we had a whole serial thing, and we did 2 lectures on mucking around with serial drivers, and we had a terrible amount of fun doing it. So you can feel free to go and watch those lectures if you'd like to learn more. You can see the serial console here on the microbit, and as I move this, there it's changing. One thing I might do is just slow this down a little bit. So I'll just sleep 50 milliseconds. I just don't want it to go too fast just to overwhelm things. So this is only going to, now it's only, is that working now? Show serial, reboot it. Where's my serial? Didn't do anything weird, did I? Sleep. 50. Send to microbit. Flashing. It's running. Oh, there we go. So it's I mean, it's still updating 20 times a second, which is not tons, but also like just to give ourselves a break with the rate of the data. Now, what about receiving this in PD? So, oh yeah, I also had this display values function. Just did some annoying maths to get the number between 0 and 1 to map to a pixel integer between 0 and 4. So I could set the display pixels, but it's not important for the lecture plan. So there's the microbit code in case you're interested. I'll move this aside so you can see it. There's my microbit code. Move my microbit. Move my screen. I want to move my microbit. You can go in the corner microbit. There you go. There's my code for the microbit. And now here is how we're going to do this in PD. So we've got our messages getting sent in FUDI format, F-U-D-I. They're going to look like this: 0.435, space 0.211, space 0.988, semicolon, \n, so carriage return, or new line. And to receive from a serial port, we're going to have to do a few things. The first thing we need is to install an external. So let's do that together. I've got my PD open. Where's my PD patch? So ISMC, we're ready to go. So in PD, you can find external libraries. So I went on my other screen, it's back. And we might want, there's lots of libraries that are available, but I want one called Comport. It's a classic library. So I've already installed it, but you can install it this way, install one. And Comport will allow us to receive data from a serial port. Let's make sure this is closed so I can get rid of that. Back to my lecture, yeah. Comport, where's PD? So far so good, but we're not doing anything. And what I need to know is what serial device we're using. So I'm going to send Comport a command to list devices, and it will print them. So here we are, available serial ports, Bluetooth incoming port, 0, TTY debug console, 1, and TTY USB modem 11302. This is the one we want. The ones that microbits and Arduinos tend to come up as things like .USB modem 11302 in macOS. There's different ways of kind of recognizing serial ports in different operating systems, but this is what I'm familiar with macOS. So first things first, let's get this connected. Where we connect it, is we will edit Comport, add, Comport to, and we'll put in the baud rate, which is the speed at which it is sending bytes to us, bytes per second. And just so I can know what's going on, let's print some data. So far, we've got a bunch of numbers. What are those numbers? Well, they're individual bytes represented in decimal format. In fact, they're ASCII bytes represented as a decimal. And we can find out what those ASCII bytes are just on a terminal. I'm going to do man ASCII and look down at our decimal bytes, and we could find some like 59 seems to be appearing reasonably frequently. 59 is a semicolon. That's an important one, isn't it? And we've also got 13 and 10 that are kind of stuck there at the end of each message. 13 is CR, which stands for carriage return, and 10 stands for new line. So in fact, we've got a couple of very important bytes that are representing the end of each message that we've sent within the Python program running on the microbit. 59 is the semicolon, and then 13 and 10 are 2 bytes representing the end of a line and going back to the start of the next one. I'm never quite clear about how we do line endings. It kind of is weirdly historically variant by operating system. Maybe having both of those there is covering all bases, or maybe it's required. Someone can tell me more about text encodings who's a text encoding fan. Any text encoding fans out there? Now's your chance to shine. Now, what are we going to do about this? Well, I've actually got a little algorithm over here that deals with this problem. Normally, if you're in a normal programming language, you just do there'd be like serial.readLine, and it would capture everything into a buffer, and every time you say read line, it would get you the string, would decode the bytes as a string up to a new line carriage return combo. But we don't get that in PD. We have to make our own read line, which is like a little bit of a bummer, but it's kind of fun to do it. So the first thing we're going to do is make something to detect the end of the line. So I've got it written up here in my little picture, but I'm just going to code it up so we can do it at the speed of a human thought and get that happening. So I've got my end of the new line, and something's going to happen when I get to the end of a line. So I'll just get a TBB box to translate those values into a sequence of bangs that will do something. Now, coming out of this output, there's everything else, all of the data which we really want. So I'm just going to, let's just put that into print and see what we get. Now we get all the information with the 59 there. And we want everything up to the 59 because that will be decoded by the foodie system as a list. But we need to get all of those bytes into a list first to send it to the foodie parser. I'll make the foodie parser just so we can see what's going on. Foodie parse, that can be there. That's ready when we need it. Okay, print can go over here. We might need it again in a minute. Now, that stuff which I've got, I'm going to start adding into a list. So I'll put it into this list prepend box, and we're going to start every time we get a new byte, we'll add it to the end of a list. So I get my list prepend, and I'm going to have a list object down here to store the data, and my list is going to keep getting prepended by the list we get out of that box. So when I get a list out of that box, whatever comes in goes out with whatever is stored at the start of it, prepended, and then I want to take whatever is coming out and then put it back in to be prepended on the next byte coming in. So my bytes will be sort of sequentially added up. So now my list, when I get an output from that box, I also want to be updating this list object down here, which we will bang to output the list once we know it's completed. And how do we know it's completed? Because we get that sequence of carriage return and new line characters, which will just be both used to trigger that list, but I really only need one. The other thing we need to do when we know we're at the end of a list is clear this object. So I can connect that bang up here to the right input of list prepend, which is going to clear the prepending list. Otherwise, our list just keeps getting longer and longer and longer inside that object, and eventually PD crashes, which I found out earlier today. I don't want that to happen today, so I'm just going to Just going to stop that right there. Now, let's start to see what we get with our, now we get our lists. That's pretty cool, isn't it? We get our 59 at the end and we get them all in one line. They're a list of bytes. And we can put them into FootyPars and print that, and we get our text. That's exactly what we wanted. And in fact, and I haven't really used this much in my whole career of messing around with PD, we can use a list, a nice list object there, just to show what we're getting in our list, which is pretty neat. So we don't need to use print now that we've got our single list. We've got our X, Y, and Z values. So let's make a couple of sliders. I'll make one, this one here. I'm just going to make it kind of a small slider. And this one can be our X slider. And that can go there. Oh, we need to unpack first. Unpack. FFF. Oh, it works. Look. I can, X's should be neutral now. I can make X be high or X be low. So that's about 1G. And then it can go down to about 2Gs if I sort of swoosh it up and down. So that's neat, isn't it? Good stuff. Okay, so we've got our first value there. Just make another couple of these sliders and hook them up. Let's give them different colors and give them different symbols to send. We're going to use that data in a minute, so we'd just like to make it clear what's going on. So I've got a nice image now. I think this looks a bit nicer than the one I've got on the slide. And this is kind of we've received our data and unpacked it now. So you can see I've got the three sliders working together. If I move the microbit in any sort of dimension, some of those go up and some of them go down. The Z one is down now, but as I move this, X goes up, but then Z goes back to neutral. If I turn the other way, X goes down, Z goes back to neutral. I can turn it this way. That's controlling Y. And I can also sort of get it on the side and control everything. There's always going to be something pointing down. And if I start to move it with a bit of intensity, everything kind of jumps around. So what did we do? We installed the COM port external. We figured out which serial port is our microbit, read some bytes in, yay bytes, assembled the bytes into lines using this little read line algorithm, decoded the lines from Footy format into a list, unpacked the list, and then we did something with the values. And I'll just list my references here as a good member of our community of collaboration. This little algorithm came from someone's website, robmiles.com. Thanks, Rob Miles. It was very late when I wanted to get this algorithm working, and they had it available for me, which was awesome. So what are we going to do next? I wonder if anyone's still watching. I'll check. Oh yeah. Thanks, people. Thanks for watching. What are we going to do next? We should make it make a sound, shouldn't we? Let's make it make a sound somehow. So I'm going to expand my patch. And we don't need very much, don't need to refer to this slide as much anymore, so I'll just bring my other stuff to the front. Now I think I've got oh, someone's still there. Thanks, folks. The wavers are still in the crowd. I've got my old favorite FM synth patch. Wow, someone just closed their door. It's intensity above my head. I've now got 4 inlets. One for the main carrier wave frequency, the harmonicity ratio, and then the modulation index. And then finally a kind of volume control at the end. So let's just be renegades and just connect this directly to the DAC. Whoa, wild stuff. I'm going to turn the DAC on. Wild stuff. I think my audio interface is working. It should come through for you folks when I start to make some sounds. I promise they won't be too loud. Make this between 0 and 1, not 0 and 127. Just to be clear, and let's just whack that one into the volume. So far, yeah, we got some, should have some noise, but not really any sound. I've turned PD down in your ears by like 30 dB, no 20 dB. So it's quite quiet unless it starts to be really there's something intensely clicky going on. So we'll keep that at 0 until we map these things in, and we can just start to get in our 3 variables: read Y, read Z. And because I want these things to be a bit slow, I'm just going to do a cheap way: smooth them out and make them a signal using LOP, low pass filter. A signal like this, an accelerometer signal, is really a low frequency signal. So I want to eliminate the chunks between each message being sent, and just get these signals directly into my synth. So I'm doing a little bit of processing already just to smooth out the signal a bit. Turn up the volume, and where's my music? I want music to be happening. It's not happening yet. Something's wrong. My meters are going all over the place, but I'm not hearing music. Well, it's because I haven't done any mapping yet, right? I've got these values between 0 and 1, and we haven't done anything useful with them to create our sound. So let's try to do something useful with them so that they go into a frequency range that is like we're interested in. So what we could do, our first one's between 0 and 1. Let's just multiply it by 1,000, hey? That's a number in hertz. There we go. Turn that guy down a bit. You should be able to hear it. I can certainly hear it. Now I can hear a little bit of FM stuff, but my other one's values have got to be moving a bit as well. This is just the X dimension. So if I move this left to right, that's scrolling in the X dimension. So far so good, but let's get the Y to do something. How about times 10? There we go. And let's get Z to do something as well. Maybe Y we don't need as much. Oh, that's a bit loud. Well, now we have a synth. It's like I'm doing a performance already. That's pretty good, isn't it? I'll just leave it down the bottom. And we'll turn you down again, Mr. Synth. You can go away. Okay, let's get some... I don't like hearing raw oscillators in performances. Let's get some reverb. Rev 2. I always forget the parameters of Rev, so let's just have a look. Get the level, liveness, crossover, damping. Level 100. It can be loud because we're going to turn down the volume of the synth part. The liveness, I want quite a long reverb, so I'm going to go to 80. Crossover like 3000, damping 20. Just the defaults is fine for those things. Whack that into my DAC. And connect this directly, which is a bit, again, a bit crazy, but it'll make it sound a bit better. Oh yeah. That's the stuff. So we've got some reverb on it now. It's sounding like I'm hurling an FM synthesizer around in a tunnel. But that's what I want for today. Now, so far so good. We've done some mapping. We've got some accelerometers to work. We've got something that makes a sound, but I've still got to use this manual volume lever. And maybe that's okay. Maybe if my composition was such that was acceptable, I could do that. But what if I wanted to have a strictly kind of gestural musical instrument? I might want to have something so that when it's just sitting here on a table, it's not just playing away, right? This is kind of annoying that it's just playing without me doing anything. And then I have to, when I pick it up, it starts to do stuff. But What I want is a way to like detect when things are happening with my system. So let's detect when things are happening. A great way to do that is to combine all of our accelerometer values together. And one way that's neat to do that is just to get the magnitude of these values. So let's get the magnitude over here. I'll just get some more receivers. And I can use Expra to get the magnitude. You know what the magnitude is. You square all of your things, and then you multiply them together, add them together, and then you take the square root. So I think that the squaring bit, I'll just, whoops, just open up the Expra help so I can see. Expra just lets us put like a complicated mathematical expression into PD. It's actually an external, but it's now sort of included within PD. So I've got my F1, F2, and F3 are my main values. I'm just going to put them in so I can hook up my connections. This is just adding them so far. Let's make a little meter so I can see what's going on. This is not right. I need this to have a square root around everything, and still not right. Right, I need to take the powers of everything so they're always in the right, or always measuring the distance of this acceleration vector from the origin. So I'll go F1, 2. I might need to move this across. It's actually not working. So F1, 2, POW F2, 2, and POW F3, 2. Okay, now we've got something, but something's not right. If I move it, it should be staying the same if I'm moving it very slowly, but it's not. It's changing up and down. And actually, I've got a problem, which is that in my original mapping, coming out of the microbit, I took away the negative acceleration values, and I really need to get them back. So I'm going to get them back in this part of the mapping. I'll subtract all of these values from 0.5. No. Yes. Yeah, I will. This is the way. Yell at me on the chat if I'm doing it wrong, but I think I'm doing it right. Something's being subtracted from something else, and something is 0.5. Let's have a look. I move it slowly, and the magnitude is not moving, which is great. I move it fast, magnitude climbs, which is good. That's what I wanted. So I guess we could multiply this by 2 to get it between 1 and, or get all the values between 1 and -1, but I think we'll be okay with what we've got now, because we just need to get this value and use it for something. So maybe I'll take that value and actually subtract that. About 260 is kind of the effective middle, and whack that into my volume control. Now it only moves when I move the microbit. That triggers this volume control to move up and down. Well, that's kind of cool, isn't it? Again, this is surprisingly satisfying as a little performance. I've got something. I need to be using a lop on that as well. Lop 3. Get my lop in. I was hearing some clicks from that volume changing. You don't want clicks. Folks, when you're making your performances, play your stuff through some speakers. If there's clicks, it's not acceptable. Don't do it. Make sure you're not hearing clicks. that's my regular mapping. What about an inverse mapping? Let's do an inverse map synth. So I'm going to make one where if we're still, the volume is going to get... is this going to work? I don't know how to do it. This is really live coding now because I haven't prepared it. But if we're still, it'll open up an envelope and make the sound louder. And if we're moving, it will close the envelope quickly. How can we do it? So what I'm going to do is set a get another measurement here. Take that through an abs. Actually take the absolute value of this first. So we can just see roughly where we're at. It does tend to muck around a little bit. I'm not sure why that would be, but you'd think it would be quite still. Anyway, I'm not sure if we can exactly control this, but let's make it greater than 0.1 will trigger the envelope to close. So I get a V line. And I need my V-line. I'm going to have to look up the V-line manual again. As always, I always forget the V-line procedure. So we're going to have a slightly complicated V-line where it goes back to 0 over like very quickly. If it triggers this bang. Oh, what? It's triggering too much. Oh, that's no good, is it? Wait a minute. Was this output? The binary operators. Oh, output's a 1 or a 0. I don't really... I guess I want cell 1. Now it's working better. I need to turn this down a bit. Sorry, I was just detecting the right kind of value. Try cell 1. Yeah. I wish I had that comment 30 seconds ago. The little comment loop is not in my favor here. Here we go. So it's going to turn the V-line down. I'll disconnect that one to start with. The V-line down, and then the V-line is going to go back to 0.5 over 5,000, maybe 5,000 milliseconds, 5 seconds after, a second at 0. So that's my V line, and it's going to turn that. No, I can't do that. Can't whack it right in there. Just trigger this to start with. Whoops. Didn't want it to be 0.2. Oh, how do I get... I'll try that again. Ah. That shouldn't be like that. It was multiplying it by 1,000. I need to make my detection more picky. Now, what I liked with the inverse mapping was where you could just sneak around on the values without triggering it, and then do something to stop it. That's pretty cool, isn't it? Just tighten that up a little tiny bit more. I want a bit more pause at 0. There we go. The other lock was pulling the value up a little bit. Well, I'm ready for my lens performance, right? Thanks for coming to my concert, everybody. That's pretty fun. I'll just save that one. I'll put it into the repo so that you have a record of it. It's too much fun. Last slide. I'll just keep moving this so it doesn't go anywhere. Yeah, we did it. We made this work in PD. Now, what about Strudel? Well, look, I'll turn the sound off in this so we can have a chat about Strudel for a minute. Strudel has some support for hardware devices built in, which is great. In particular, it's got a good support for MIDI inputs. It's got some good support for certain human interface devices, that is game controllers. It says it can do OSC, but really what it can do is OSC output. It can output OSC to things, not so much acting as a server getting input. So if you want to be sending OSC to it, that's not such a good idea. The two things you can do with Strudel, which you might need to investigate a bit more. The first one would be to do exactly what we're doing with Serial, except in JavaScript. So you could use Web Serial API to connect Serial devices to your browser. Totally doable. Little bit of work. I had an investigation last night, probably pretty late, to see if I could get an example on a slide, and it just wasn't going to happen. There's quite a bit of machinery involved in making that happen. What I have seen folks do not with Strudel, but with other programming languages is, I think it's around here somewhere. Oh yeah, is to use WebSockets. So you could send data to your browser by setting up a WebSocket server, which you can just do in JavaScript. Const socket equals new WebSocket, blah, socket.add event listener stuff. Connects to listening to events on that port, 9080, localhost 9080. Then you could be listening to WebSocket messages sent from another programming language. So a good example last year was seeing people write some Python code that would send WebSocket messages to their browser. So of course, this is again some work. I might demo this in week 11 lecture just to demonstrate that idea. This is some work, but it's a good way to connect something in Python to a browser. And then if you wanted to have Serial to Python, you could do it that way, or you could do Serial straight to the browser with Web API. Again, you've got JavaScript, so you've got quite a fully featured programming language, and the web APIs for all of this stuff have gotten to be very good. So there's a lot of options and opportunities to connect hardware in specific ways. I just wanted to show off how to do it in PD because it's quite clear how to make those connections and quite clear how to do the mappings with all of these little multiplications and considerations of how mapping should work. So yeah, so serial to standard strudel, again, this is going to be a bit harder, but there's lots of ways to do that. You don't get serial support automatically in strudel. You just get everything else support. Strudel is so packed full of stuff, isn't it? Also, again, Arduino, I didn't do a demo with Arduino. I really like playing with microbits because the sensors are on board, which you may not realize is the reason that they're used in Comp 2300, because I chose to use this hardware some years ago when we were teaching it, so that I could get a fully featured input-output system into every student's hands. So if you've got microbits around, I know there've got to be a zillion microbits around our school. If you don't have one, probably there's someone at the Computer Science Student Association who's got like 20 in a drawer. Just from every single student is sort of gifted one is in Comp 2300 to complete that course for the last few years. So there's got to be some around. But other microcontrollers are also available. And these things aren't very expensive if you want to buy one. If you're interested in Arduino stuff, I've got a tutorial in Arduino connecting to PD from some years ago. So that's pretty old stuff, but it probably will still work, probably. And the outro, I guess the point to make is that hardware interactions, hardware interfaces could be a whole course. It's not. The other thing to realize is that making hardware stuff work is a bit hard. And you know, I did this very, very quickly because I already had all my code there. I already had a accelerometer sending script for microbit that I knew would work, and just got this to work with Foodie. And then I could write the PD stuff because I knew what I wanted to do with the mapping. But getting things to work with hardware can be a bit tricky, and systems like Microbit and Arduino do their best to make it a forgiving experience, but it certainly requires some time investment. So if you're interested in doing that, it would be a good idea to start a little bit earlier so you have some time to prototype your system and work with it. And with that, I'm at the end of the lecture. So thank you very much for the folks who have joined me online live today on YouTube and Twitch. I'll get this lecture into Echo 360 as well, as of course it'll also be saved in YouTube forever, I presume, until Google kicks me out or something. Yeah, any last minute questions? I'm just going to wait for a second before shutting it down. But sometimes when I do these lectures and put them on YouTube, people watch them. And there was an instance where I gave a lecture on operating systems in 2300, where I think I released the lecture like the week before finals in the States, and a whole lot of operating system students watched it. And it's my most watched YouTube video, or at least one of the top watched YouTube videos, because there were like thousands of students studying for their exams, searching for stuff about operating systems on YouTube. And they would leave me comments like, "Oh, this is such a great lecture on operating systems. It's really helped in my course." I'm like, aren't you supposed to be like doing more than one lecture? Is this really going to work? Is this one lecture, like super high level, hand wavy overview of OS, really a substitute? But I guess it was up to them. Anyway, I will see you folks next week. We'll do back in the room for our lecture at the regular time of 12 p.m. on Monday. There are still there are still 3 more lectures in this class, week 10, week 11, week 12. And I will be doing them all because it's a good opportunity for folks to come and ask questions and to keep reminding you about what's important in your final performances. So I want to be there with you as we get to the exam period. So thanks so much for today. Catch you later.